March 21st will be the Friday of the first round of the NCAA tournament. So we are literally 1 month away from the first round, which we were reminiscing a little bit during the break about those Thursday, Fridays, and like what those are like at a sports book if you're in Vegas or Atlantic City or wherever, National Harbor, wherever you might be. Like, it's just an electric atmosphere. Everyone is so excited for these games. And with the madness being 1 month away, I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the projected top 2 seeds and some of these teams, and if any of them are kind of ripe for picking early on in this tournament, like who might be getting bounced early in the NCAA tournament that doesn't really get out of that first weekend. So the number 1 seeds, a lot of the bracketology websites that you might go to, Auburn, Alabama, Duke, Florida. I don't really think any of those teams are going to get bounced out early in the tournament. Maybe you can make the case for Alabama doing so, but I mean, right now, I'm not going to really make that case. The 2 seeds, though, are what really interests me: Houston, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Iowa State. But of those 8 teams, PJ, which one do you think is most likely to have an early exit this time next month in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I think the pretty popular answer would probably be Tennessee, right? I mean, this is a team that, yes, they are elite defensively, but offensively, they can really go on cold stretches. And Femi, they really rely on one guy, Chaz Lanier, to do a majority of their scoring. And if he's struggling, then it like really becomes a problem for Tennessee. So when you're looking for these teams that get upset early, right? You either want to fade teams like Kentucky last year who lost to Oakland that are terrible defensively, or you want to fade teams like Tennessee that can go really cold offensively, right? And especially a team like Tennessee that relies on a lot of threes, well, that helps out the mid-majors, or that helps out the lower seeds that they're facing, because chances are they're not as big, they're not as athletic as the higher seed that they're playing. So I think if you were looking for a 1 or 2 seed that you would maybe put on upset alert early, I think Tennessee would probably be the team. I got to tell you, though, Wisconsin's becoming a little too trendy for me. Femi, how many times do we see in March Madness a team get hot at the end of the year, win their conference championship, and then everybody loves them going into the tournament, right? Was that not Auburn last year? Did everybody love Auburn? What'd they do? Lost to Yale in the first round. How about Keegan Murray's Iowa team? Did everybody not fall in love with Iowa? What'd they do in the first round? They lost to Richmond. Michigan State and Denzel Valentine. Everybody loved Sparty that year as a 2 seed. People thought they should have been a 1 seed. They lose to Middle Tennessee State. So this stuff does happen a lot. And Wisconsin, to me, is kind of looking like that team, Femi, that their offense is rolling right now. Everybody's falling in love with them. And if they run through the Big Ten championship and they get that 2 seed, I don't know, Femi. I'd be a little nervous if I was a Badger fan. I'm not saying they'd lose in the first round, but I think there's a chance that potentially round of 32 with the wrong matchup, Badgers could be on upset alert.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's so interesting about this whole setup, because we've had a lot of people come on and talk college basketball all throughout this week, and everyone like unanimously loves Wisconsin now.
Yep.
And for good reason. Like, the Badgers have been amazing recently. Like, they're really, really good. They have a tough game against Oregon coming up tomorrow at home, but the game they're expected to win by like 8-9 points or whatever. But I mean, they just beat Iowa. They beat Purdue in a really impressive fashion last Saturday, and they beat Illinois and made light work of them, especially in the second half Tuesday night over there in Madison. Like, everybody is now buying in on the Badgers, and I'm kind of with you, PJ. Like when I was thinking about teams that might have an early exit, Wisconsin was on my list. There's another team on the list, which I'm going to get to shortly, but just speaking about the Badgers, like, this just feels like this is going to be one of those teams that everyone just kind of gravitates towards because they're playing a new brand of basketball. This isn't the Bo Ryan, Dick Bennett kind of style of like walk the ball up the court and let's play in the 50s and 60s. No, they're getting into the 90s with regularity. Like, they're getting into the 80s with regularity. Like, this is up tempo. It doesn't look like what your typical Wisconsin team has looked like over the better part of 2 decades or so. So for me, Wisconsin would be one of those teams that, like, I'm not looking to buy in on the Badgers. Another team that kind of fits that bill for me as well, and this one might shock some people just because this is a really, really good team and they're coached by a really, really good coach. But I had the Houston Cougars on upset watch early in the tournament, PJ. Like, I think Houston, just like, I get it. They've been shooting the 3 a little bit better this year, but I still cannot get out of my head these typical Houston tournament games to where they have that 6-minute drought where 0 field goals in the last 6:30 or so. You see the graphic come up and it's like, oh boy, here we go again with Houston. Like this Houston team that, yeah, like maybe you blame the Jamal Shed injury last year as to why they lost to Duke, and maybe they would have gone to the Final Four, but there's always something going on with the Houston Cougars. And I think that just like the way that this team played in the non-conference time against the neutral sites like Alabama, the San Diego States, they weren't that impressive. It wasn't until Big 12 play where they really ramped things up. And I'm looking at this Houston team as well. I watched the game last month when they took on Kansas. Kansas should have beaten them. And this is a Kansas team that nobody wants anything to do with right now. So Houston, to me, really impressive, and we're going to see them tomorrow when they take on Iowa State. But I'm not buying in on the Cougars because I've seen it fail too many times. The one time they actually broke through and made the Final Four was the bubble year with the COVID, the 2021 tournament, which I'm kind of putting an asterisk on that tournament just to begin with because I'm like, I don't know like what was going on during that time. Outside of that, they seem to always come up short, whether it's in the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16. But I wouldn't be surprised if early on they got clipped as well, because if they go cold, they can lose to anybody on any given day, even if it's a likes of like a 10 seed or a 7 seed, which they would face in the second round on that Saturday or Sunday.
Femi, another point I want to add to with Houston, which is important, and a lot of people are going to bring this up probably like a week leading into March Madness, but it's why I would hold off on betting Houston futures, because they're rolling through the Big 12 right now. They look really good. Keep in mind, for people out there, 100% of the national champions since 2004 have been in the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. Why is Week 6 significant? Because it's a lot of what Femi was talking about. It's kind of the period when we finish up all those neutral site feast week type games, when it's those early tournaments out in Maui, Vegas, Disney World, wherever it may be. Houston was ranked 15th. So you need to look at teams inside the top 12 at Week 6. It's before conference play starts, where there's so much familiarity and everybody knows each other, and kind of when non-conference play finishes up. So, Femi, Houston was not inside that top 12. So, look, maybe that trend at some point is due to be broken, and Houston certainly would be a team good enough to do so. But, I mean, again, it's been since 2004. I mean, here we are like 21 years later, right? And all the champions have been in that top 12. UConn was in there the last 2 years. So that's another concern on top of everything that you were mentioning about Houston. And I just always feel like, Femi, like Houston has a guy, right? Like it is a Quentin Grimes, a Marcus Sasser, a Jamal Shed. I don't think LJ Crier's like the guy. I don't think that Emmanuel Sharp is the guy. So I'm with you.
Probably Jawan Roberts, right? Like, is like their best guy. Like, but he's a big. Like, he's not the guy that's going to control the game. Guard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm with you. A lot of people are high on Houston. Seems like you aren't, and I'm with you. I'm not in on them either.
Yeah, like, and if Houston marches all the way to San Antonio, they ultimately win the title, I'll tip the cap. But like, I'm not going to be invested on this Houston Cougars team. I've been there, done that. We've learned from our past mistakes, and I'll be on the sidelines when it comes to the Houston Cougars. We bursted the bubble for Houston. We bursted the bubble for Wisconsin. How about let's talk about some dark horse Final Four teams, PJ? Like some teams that are like, you look at the betting market, they're around like that 10-1 or greater price to make the Final Four, not necessarily win the title, just to make the Final Four and win 4 games in the tournament. Who would be the team that you would identify at that kind of long shot price?
Well, a team that I've been talking about for a while on this network that is starting to get a little bit more trendier and just had a big win this week was Missouri, and I really like Missouri. Femi, this is a team, man, they can score. And their head coach, Dennis Gates, has done a hell of a job. This was a team that did not win a game in SEC play this past season, and now they have 3 wins against top 10 teams this year. They've been unbelievable. They won at Florida. They just dropped 110 on Bama. They can shoot, man. Their offense is legit. Everybody remembers Jack Golke off of Oakland last year, the guy who hit 10 threes against Kentucky. Missouri's got that guy this year. His name's Caleb Grill. He's fantastic. So keep an eye on Mizzou. And then the Big Ten, you mentioned, Femi, everybody's talking about Wisconsin. Keep an eye on Maryland. Maryland's got one of the best starting 5s in all of college basketball. They don't have much depth, but they have the kind of team that can go deep in March. Their best player is Derek Queen, who's a true freshman, and to me, he's like college Jokic. He does everything. He's 6'10", he gets the rebounds, he brings the ball up the floor, they run offense through him. He's got a great mid-range jumper, great passer, he does everything. And then they have 3 guards that can really shoot. Jacoby Gillespie's awesome, Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel. My concern about the Terps, Femi, is their coach, Kevin Willard. I'm not a fan. He's never made it past the Sweet 16, never made it past the round of 32. He's never been to the Sweet 16 or beyond. So That's my concern with Maryland, and they didn't really challenge themselves in the non-conference. You know, we saw a lot of these Big Ten teams against, like, SEC teams. Maryland's toughest team they play in the non-conference was like Syracuse. So they quite literally played one of the worst non-conference schedules. This is what's tough about handicapping the tournament, especially with a team like Maryland. How much stock do you buy into what you're seeing them do in conference play? But just from eye test, what the metrics are telling you, outside of Missouri, because I know they're starting to climb up a little bit, become a little bit more trendy, keep an eye on the Terps as well.
Yeah, and I think the general consensus from this conversation, the big takeaway for people that are watching and listening would be that, like, conference play, even though it's what we all like kind of like lock in on, that's when college basketball really starts to ramp up, it can be very noisy. It's not super predictive as to how teams will perform in the actual NCAA tournament, because now you're back to playing unfamiliar opponents and you're in unfamiliar environments and you have to react and adapt to all of that stuff, which is why non-conference, which PJ mentioned, that week 6 AP poll has been very predictive in terms of who actually wins the NCAA tournament, because those are the kind of teams that are thriving in some of those unfamiliar environments that we see early on during the Maui Invitational and like the Feast Week and all those other holiday tournaments that we get to start the college basketball season. For me, real quick before we have to head to break, the team that I'm on, we talked about them a little bit earlier during the show here this week, but the Oregon Ducks, for me, would be the long shot team to make the Final Four, and it's a massive price. It is very big, around 50-1 to make the Final Four. I just love their head coach, Dana Altman, and I'm saying this as somebody who roots for the University of Washington. I don't like the Oregon Ducks. In fact, I hate the Oregon Ducks, but we can at least be honest. Like we said, we root for our wallets. We go to the green. We don't care about the colors on the jersey or on the sweater. And in this instance, it's green on the sweater, on the jersey, I should say, for the Oregon Ducks. But Dana Altman, this dude is amazing in the tournament. His teams are always peaking in March. And Oregon early on in the season did show us some of their prowess in non-conference play. Like, they beat Texas A&M on a neutral site. They beat Alabama on a neutral site earlier this year. So like, this team has shown us the ceiling to compete with some of the best teams in the country. They've hit a big-time lull in Big Ten play, although they've recently now won 3 straight. If they continue to do what Altman teams usually do in March and get better, this is a very, very scary team if you have them in your bracket. I think Oregon can be the bracket buster as like a 9, 8, 7 seed that ultimately reaches San Antonio and wins 4 games.